If you don't have sales experience, then you're going to need to couch your resume in terms that show you have transferable skills. So, you have to show how your experience lines up with that position description and how you're going to be able to be a success there. So start with the position description, highlight it, go through, really understand it. As you're doing that, if you have questions about the job, put them on a sticky note or something, because if you get a job interview, then you're going to want to ask intelligent questions. So, if you have things that come to mind as you're doing your position description, make sure that you're jotting those down somewhere so that you can ask good questions. Next, you want to look at Google and LinkedIn, and you want to figure out, what do positions like this do? What are generally, what are the general requirements? What do people who are successful in this position bring to the table? And you want to use things like LinkedIn to examine the resumes of, let's say, prior incumbents for that position, or people that have, that have a similar background who are working at the company, in similar positions. If let's say it's a sales position, it's probably not just one salesperson there. So if you can identify people that are in similar positions elsewhere in the company, you'll get an idea of the skills that you need to bring and talk about in your resume. And then finally, you do want to be able to talk to people about their experience with that job, or what they know about that job. If you have somebody who's an inside connection, or somebody who knows somebody, go ahead and ask them, what do you know about this position? What can you tell me about how to sell myself for this position? Next, I want to talk about something called Jobscan, and this is going to be your best friend in your job search. Because virtually everybody is using an applicant tracking system now, you want to make sure that your resume aligns as closely as possible to what that ATS is going to be looking for. Well, Jobscan, if you Google Jobscan, or you go to www.jobscan.io, you can sign up with them. Now, this is not an endorsement. I have no financial interest in Jobscan. I'm not getting compensated for including this in my presentation in any way, shape, or form, but you can use it for free. It will do a certain number, I think 5 scans a month, or you can pay for it. And my advice is that if you are doing a big full-time job search, you probably ought to invest in yourself. And so get a Jobscan account. What Jobscan does is it allows you to cut and paste the position description that you will see on the website of the company, or in monster.com, Indeed, the IAEM job site, or anything like that. You're going to pull down that position description, and you're going to customize your resume as best you can, and then you're going to scan them both in. And Jobscan will automatically look at your resume versus the position description, and it will give you feedback that looks something like this. Now, I couldn't cut and paste the entire output because it's kind of long, but as you can see here, it will tell you, excuse me, how well you're matching up to what they're looking for. And it will give you specific feedback in various areas that are going to be important for you to then revise your resume. And you can, if you're a paid member of Jobscan, you can scan it again and again and again, and it will give you additional feedback to help you really dial it in. So this is a valuable tool that you ought to be employing. As you can see here, it looks at things like your skills and your keywords, right? So we talk in resume world about knowledge, skills, and abilities, or KSAs. This is especially important in the federal government. But knowledge, skills, and abilities are those things that you have to bring to the table to convince an employer that you're going to be a success. And so they're highlighted in the position description as keywords. And as you can see in this example, it says time management appears on the job description 2 times and is not on your resume. So if time management is an important enough attribute of that job to be mentioned twice in the position description, and you don't have some feature of your resume that talks about your ability to be good at time management, then you're not going to get the best score from the ATS, and you might not get read. They're looking for job title matches, education matches, and even as far as standard formatting. One of the other things that Jobscan will do is tell you about how to improve both your resume format for readability by an automatic scanner, and how to improve your LinkedIn profile. So there's lots of valuable information that this can bring to the table. Here's another piece of the printout, and it tells you on the left-hand column. There are specific skills that they're looking for. It will have variations of those words, so SEO or the site optimization. It'll show in the job description how many times it's mentioned, and in your resume. So you can really begin to dial this in, and also you'll note there that it says SEO is a required skill, right? So if that's an absolute required skill, it better be mentioned several times in your resume to show that you really know what you're doing and your skills line up. So enough on JobScan. Let's talk about some things that relate to how your resume will get read by the person once you're past the ATS stage. There's no room for typos. I mean, if you have a typo on your resume and I read it, I'm going to stop right there and put it in the column that's going in the trash can. Because to me, as a reviewer, it says to me that you don't care enough to have read your resume 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 times, had somebody else or 2 or 3 people read it a couple of times, because your resume is your selling point, and you'll need to care enough about yourself that there are no errors. Because if you're sloppy about selling yourself, you might be construed as sloppy about the work that you do, either for the employer or in selling or whatever. So your resume is your one chance to really make that first impression. You don't get a second chance to make a first impression, so make it a good one, and don't have typos. Several of the folks that I know that do recruiting and headhunters have said that, they spend 30 seconds or so looking at a resume when they have it in their hands. I saw an article online from a recruiter, and she indicated that she spends on average 6 seconds per resume. So what do you get for that 6 seconds or the 30 seconds? Basically, you get a quick scan. You get a scan that appeals to the reader's sense, aesthetic sense, really. So, if your resume doesn't look nice, if it's tiny little font, if it's all jammed together, if there's not enough white space to make it easily readable, it's not going to get read. Because again, if you have a stack of resumes this big, why are you going to waste your time with a microscope or a reading glass, magnifying glass, trying to decipher somebody's tiny print resume, or if it's in some sort of funny font, like if it's in Comic Sans or something like that. It has to be a nice and professional presentation. So 30 seconds, it's not a lot of time. Typos, formatting, gaps, experience that's not germane, or not lined up to keywords. All of these things are going to get you screened out. And if you have embellished the truth, that's going to get you screened out faster than anything else. And even if it turns out that you get the job and then you get a background check, you can be terminated for having had a falsehood on your resume. So stay away from the creative writing and stick with the facts. Now, a lot of people ask me, how long should my resume be? There used to be a thought that it should only be 1 page. And I think that was pretty much in the old days when people were sending in paper resumes. And you didn't want resumes to separate. You didn't want to staple them, and you didn't want them, your second page to get lost. Nowadays, I think that on average, a resume can be 2 pages. And in some cases, 3. My resume is 3 pages, but I've been in the workforce since 1986, and I've got a long story to tell. But even at that, I thin it out. I thin it down, and I'll show you some examples of how I've done that. If you are just entering the workforce, you've only just emerged from college, or you just emerged from the military, and you had sort of one big job. 1, 2 pages is probably going to be more than adequate. And again, don't waste a lot of time and effort embellishing if you don't have any real experience. People understand that if they're hiring for an entry-level job, that they don't expect you to come with years and years of experience. So match your resume length to your particular circumstances, to the type of job that's being offered. If you're looking at a senior position, executive level position, 2-3 pages is probably good, and 3 pages is almost assuredly the limit. So I want to show you here a resume, and to tell you what, I just recognized that we have a Q&A. Do we want to take a quick Q&A break, Tam?
Yeah, I can go ahead and read this question.
Sure.
So it's in reference to your statement about Jobscan. It says, if everyone is using Jobscan, then everyone's resume will end up being eerily similar, whether the experience is genuinely attained or keywords have been shoved in the resume. The least common denominator becomes the same for everyone across the board. So what is the end game? What is the point? And is this cementing that the resume is an outdated formality?
No, I would disagree with that premise entirely. You're only going to get so far with Jobscan, right? If you don't have the qualifications and the ability to describe your qualifications, having all the keywords in there isn't going to help you. So what Jobscan does is it takes your resume, your experience, and the way you've written about it, and it sees how it matches up against what's needed. it doesn't mean that everybody's resume, everybody's experience is going to come out sounding exactly the same. It's not going to be vanilla. And so it's up to you to make sure that that doesn't happen. And I'm going to talk about some things in a minute here about how you can do that to really make sure that you're driving home your qualifications. Again, Jobscan's a tool. It's not going to be the be all and end all, but it is going to give you a competitive advantage. And I will tell you also that not everybody is using it. Smart people are, but you know, if there are 100 of us on this webinar right now, that may be 100 more people who are using Jobscan tomorrow, but that's not the vast majority of the people that are out there.
All right, and then just another question that popped into the chat, which will probably roll into your next section. Reference length, do you want to include all your history, just not much detail, or you know, are you looking to highlight the important stuff? How do you kind of condense it down but still represent yourself?
So I think the consensus of the recruiters is that you really need to talk about your most relevant positions, your last 10 years, let's say. If you've been in the job force for 20 or more years, you probably only want to talk about the last 10 years. I'll show you some ways that I've handled that. There are times when you want to talk about every single job. Federal resumes tend to be that kind of situation. I think there are good ways that you can distill down jobs. You know, if you're applying for a position and it's not really relevant, probably leave it off, or boil it down to one line rather than several bullets. Let's look at Sarah Jones's resume here, and then I'll show you what I did to her resume, not her real name. And I will also, well, I'll make some comments here. So Sarah's applying for a position, and I would say that, she is looking for something that is basically either a new position or in a new career, or she's relatively junior level individual. What you see on her resume here is a standard approach to discussing her positions and the duties of her positions. And this is the first big mistake of resumes. Your resume should not simply read like a mini position description for all the jobs that you've had. What you want to do with your resume is tell the story of not just what you did, but how well you did it. You want to tell success stories, and there's an art to doing that, and I'll get into that. But if you read down through her resume here, you will see that that she lists out her jobs, and she talks about her positions in some fairly generic terms. So I want to specifically point out, let's say, the volunteer coordinator position. She says she coordinated volunteer activities. She maintained a voter database, and she worked with the entire staff to coordinate campaign affairs. These things don't really tell me anything other than, what she did in abstract terms, but no successes whatsoever there. Now, it is good that she's used hard action verbs at the beginning of each bullet. Coordinated, maintained, although I would maintain worked with is not really a hard action verb. It doesn't really tell me very much. Organized is good. You want to use verbs primarily that end in ed, unless they're current, it's a current position, in which case you can use verbs in the present tense. But you want to have words that talk about you doing something, and you want to avoid repetition of those verbs. So look at the Smith and Jones campaigns. It says worked with, managed, managed. That's an opportunity to, that second manage is an opportunity to describe that position in a better term, and present some variability. Other things I want to talk about in this resume are the education. Now, it's good that the education here is listed after experience, because one of the common things that people who are still in school or fresh out of school do is they'll put their education first. And employers, they like people that have good educations or college degrees, don't get me wrong, but what they really want is to see what kind of work experience you have and what you bring to the table in terms of what you can do. And so here, Sarah has wasted a bunch of space. She's taken this all the way back to her high school, to 2 high schools. And that adds no value whatsoever. I don't care what high school you went to. The only time I would even consider that is if I knew that the hiring manager went to my high school, and that it was a small high school and we had a lot of stuff in common. And, that might be something that was eye-catching. But right here in this circumstance, it's a waste of space. Additionally, what else is a waste of space is the fact that she has listed her interests. Almost invariably, recruiters will tell you that they don't care about your interests. They'll find out anything like that in an interview if you're a really interesting candidate. But by and large, the fact that she played volleyball or she was in Kappa Alpha Theta sorority is not going to be enough to get her the interview. So better that space is not wasted. It's used to describe more fully what she did and how well she did it. Additionally, please look at the amount of white space on the left side of the page. I get it. It's sort of semi-appealing to have your bullets away from the word experience or education or interests, but it ultimately ends up chewing up valuable real estate that you need to use to describe yourself in glowing terms. Other things that I think are important to point out here, and this is very common, is people put their address and phone numbers, and they want to be contactable at any time. Look, this is sort of a vestige of days when resumes were done on paper. And advice that I've gotten from recruiters are, you don't need an address, just put a cell phone and an email. That's how people are being contacted these days, and don't waste the space. The other thing that I want to point out is look at the very first bullet, coordinated volunteer activities, and recognize that the 2 words council race on that second line of that bullet, they consume space, and it doesn't really add value. So anytime you have an orphan like that, that's what that's referred to, is you want to make sure that you reword or rewrite the bullet so you're not losing an entire line for the sake of 1 or 2 words. Also, notice that this resume has very large margins and it's right justified. So right justified is harder to read than ragged right. And right justification means you get funny spacing and you get words that get then forced over to another line because they don't meet the justification standards of the word processor. So stay away from right justification, use ragged right margins. And then finally, I would say, try and use a better font than this. And ATSs very often will not be able to interpret words if they're in a serif font, in other words, something like Times New Roman. So stick with things like Helvetica or Arial or Calibri. I know that they're sort of droll, but it doesn't, again, the human eye is not reading these, the machine is reading them. So here's how I rewrote this, and I will confess that I did take the lazy way out in this presentation. I didn't want to, this is an old slide, and I didn't want to totally redo this slide. I'm sorry, I was really short on time. But had I done that, I would have taken out the extraneous information at the top and just, again, used a cell phone number and an email. That would have given me more space and would have been slightly less crunched. But if you compare these side by side, I think you can see that, that the resume on the right is much more readable. It's easier to chunk out where they worked, when they worked, to see what the positions are, and compare the position title. The position, the reader's going to read down the left-hand column, and the first thing they're going to see is all caps, volunteer coordinator, legal assistant, lobbying assistant, instead of having that stuff in upper and lower case, and you have to try and figure it out where it is. And at the same time, you can go down the right-hand column and see the chronology very easily. And again, cleaning out the education and the interests gives you more space to work on the substance of the resume. Now, again, pleading that I took the lazy way out on this. This resume lacks a summary statement, some sort of profile. You'll see it on my resume in a minute, but I think it's a good practice to include some sort of profile in there, because if nothing else gets read by the reviewer, then the profile is likely to be what's read. And again, the profile also gives you the opportunity to drop those keywords in that are going to be scanned by the ATS. So here's my resume, and this is one that I had submitted fairly recently. Again, at the top, I have my name, phone number, and email, and then my profile. You try and want to make this as pithy as possible. I've tried to maximize the words on each line by putting bullets in line. So between organizational security expert and substantive legislative branch experience, I'm able to squeeze more bullets than if I listed each bullet on its own line. I would have wasted a lot of space. Next thing I want you to see is that I haven't given month and day. Again, unless you're fresh out of college, you can probably just limit your dates of employment to your years. I've highlighted in this resume, I didn't actually submit a highlighted resume, but I've highlighted some key things that I think differentiate this from just a traditional listing of duties. All right. So whenever you can quantify something in a resume, either the size of an account you managed, the number of people that you supervised, the time that you saved, the money that you saved, the successes you had. These are all things that I've highlighted here. And so these are the kinds of things that make your resume stand out from just a simple job description. And again, if you look in the right-hand page, achieved 47 million in certified recurring savings, increased on-time inspections by 47%, reducing clearance time from 6 months to 5 days. That's an achievement. That's a success that can be celebrated. That's going to catch somebody's eye if they're looking for somebody who has a proven track record. Since I said the words proven track record, I do want to say that it probably means it's probably a good idea to stay away from sort of empty cliches like that. If you say that you have a proven track record, my response is, as a reader, okay, prove to me that you have this track record. But you prove to people that you have the track record by showing the successes in your resume. I do want to point out a section on prior professional experience. And so this is the way that I encapsulate some of the stuff that wasn't directly relevant to the job that I was applying for, but at the same time added value in some way. Okay, I didn't want to go all the way back to 1985 and have full job descriptions, but it gives the reader a pretty good idea of the kind of experience that I brought to the table for this position. And then this resume did spill over to basically 2.5 pages because I thought it was valuable in this case to talk about the kinds of things that I had done that are sort of pro bono or collateral duties as assigned. I wanted to bring that stuff in and show my active involvement in the profession. And I encourage you to do that whenever you can, whether it's in your profile or as some sort of note on the resume itself. This is the way I chose to do it.
So Eric, a couple of questions actually in regards to those. So there was a question, do you list awards and special recognitions such as Eagle Scout, Military Honors, Valor Awards, etc.? And then similarly in line with that question, if you have multiple degrees, should you list them all or just the ones that are relevant to the job you're applying for?
Okay, great question. So Eagle Scout, no, unless you're, basically fresh out of college. If you have military awards, I might put that up in a profile. You've got a Bronze Star or, Purple Heart winner, that might be good for a profile. If you have awards that are directly professionally relevant, in other words, you were Emergency Manager of the Year for the state of Virginia in 2019, I would put that on the resume because that really says something. Every degree, yeah, I have all my degrees listed and I have my certifications listed. I don't think I would include an associate level degree given that I have a master's degree. But, I would definitely, if you have a BA and an AA or an AAS or something like that, I would definitely include both of them. Degrees show stick-to-itiveness, not intelligence, all right? So, so employers want to know that you have grit, and getting a master's degree on top of a BA says something about your grit and your determination. So I would include them. I put my security clearances on this because a lot of the jobs that I was applying for required security clearances. And I wanted people to understand sort of the depth of things that I brought to the table. Be careful, think about this, put yourselves in the view of the position of a reviewer, of somebody who's reading your resume, and think about what's going to stick out for them. You know, if you have a degree in medieval basket weaving and you're applying to be the emergency manager for your county, the medieval basket weaving, if it's like a third degree or something, I might leave that off. I might focus on the AA degree in emergency management or the certificate in emergency management, coupled with my bachelor's degree in public policy or something like that, or public administration. You want stuff to leap off the page at them, and so you want to be careful that you're not overwhelming them, reader, with information that's just ancillary.
Great. And then another one on appearance. Someone wanted to clarify, did they hear correctly? Do not use Times New Roman. And additionally, with the way that they look, looking at the resume examples, they look pretty plain. There are several dynamic resume templates out with colors and layouts and etc. That are more eye-catching. How, if at all, does that affect the ATS reading?
Yeah, it can interfere with the ATS reading, and having columns, having colors, having funny fonts can interfere with an ATS scanning it. And the general recommendation is to keep it simple and plain. That doesn't mean it has to be boring. And please don't take my admonition about Times New Roman as never use it. Just understand that it is considerably easier for people to read and for machines to read sans serif fonts like Helvetica or Arial or Calibri. That said, you'll notice that my resumes are in Garamond and in Times New Roman. So, you know, you just got to decide what works for you.
All right, well, we have a little bit less than 10 minutes left. And if anybody wants to stay later and ask some more questions, we will, as long as Erik's available, we will go ahead and stick to that. But I know he had a couple more things he wanted to note. I know you were going to lead into federal resumes.
Yep.
Along with that, I wanted to note there was a question about military.
Yep.
Let me pull back up and find that real quick. All right, for those of us in the military, what's the best way to explain our experience to the civilian world? That's pretty much the easiest way to answer the question or ask the question.
Well, of course, it depends on what you did, right? There's no really great, easy answer to that. It's really helpful if you're making a transition out of the military and you've done your research to know that somebody on the other end, on the receiving end, is former military. So my advice is, as you're thinking about the jobs that you want to apply for, let's say you apply for a position, you put your job in through the regular channels, then try, and this applies to anybody, by the way, try and backdoor it to somebody that's at that firm already. And especially if you're military, if you've got somebody that's, you know, former Army, like my former colleague Dave is, you know, retired Army, and he loves seeing resumes come in that, you know, are somebody that's transitioning from the Army to civilian life. I think the thing you need to look at is describing your military roles in as transferable way as possible. You know, obviously driving a tank or, you know, being an artillery officer or something is not going to translate to most jobs in the civilian sector. But the discipline, the you know, the processes that you go through in making decisions are transferable, and you need to highlight that. And so, you know, and I would also hasten to say that in every military role that there's both, you know, there's something that's transferable to the civilian sector that's going to resonate in the civilian sector as well.
All right. And just so we don't run out of time on this, if you want to go ahead and touch on the federal, the importance of, we just went over trying to keep it to a minimum, but we all know with the federal ones, we need to pretty much note our entire history since we learned to walk.
Yep. So this is what I submitted for position as Director of National Exercise and Training Division at FEMA a long time ago. The federal resume, you will note, wants very specific information. They want to know your title. They want to know the dates, month and year. They want to know how many hours a week. Were you full-time? Were you part-time? What was your salary? Who was your supervisor? And they want to know everything about your job. And the only thing I can say about the federal format resume is that. And fortunately, the federal government is realizing that it really is a painful thing to do a federal resume, and they're moving away from it in a lot of respects. That said, there are still positions out there that require your federal resume format. And the one caution that I would make is that you absolutely have to address every single KSA in your job descriptions, in your bullets. And let me tell you a story. So I had been a firefighter paramedic in Montgomery County for about 3 years as a volunteer. I was living in the fire station, and I applied for a position at NIH Fire Department. And I filled out, the form, and I sent in my resume, and, I had virtually every class that the fire academy offered. I was an officer in my department. I had been in the fire department for 3 years and in EMS for about 10, and I got rejected. And so I spoke to one of the HR people, and I was like, I don't understand. Can you help me understand how I'm rated not qualified for this position? And she looked at my resume, and then she looked at the position description, and she said, well, you didn't describe what you do as a firefighter. I said, well, I don't understand what you mean. And to me, it was pretty plain. I said I was a firefighter. I mean, like, how simplistic can that be? And she said, well, the position description says that firefighters stretch the hose, attach a hose to the hydrant, that they stretch the hose from the fire engine to the seat of the fire, and they apply water in an effort to extinguish the fire. And you haven't said that anywhere in your resume. And I just don't even know how to process that. Yeah, there are some things that are just so simple that they ought not to require a description. But, she said I needed to talk about stretching the hose. I needed to talk about the application of water. I needed to talk about hooking up to a hydrant, because those were the knowledge, skills, and abilities of a firefighter. And, I'm paraphrasing because it was a long, long time ago and I don't remember everything, but you get the idea. If you're doing a federal job, you have to literally highlight the KSAs and make sure each and every single one of them is listed in your resume. And it's fine to actually almost do it verbatim. It's fine, because that's what they're looking for. Don't know what else to tell you about federal format resumes. So let's talk briefly about cover letters, and then I'll answer any questions that you have. So I think that a cover letter is an absolute necessity. I take the time to write a cover letter. It's not a generic kind of cover letter. It's specific to the job that's being offered. And it's, it shows that you've spent time researching the company and that you have skills. And it's an opportunity to have the person who's reading it get a little bit more insight into your resume, to look for certain things. It also shows your ability to write a good, solid English sentence and a good letter, because that's a skill that's going to be useful in a lot of positions. Even if a cover letter is not required, in many applicant tracking systems, you can upload additional documents. So even when they don't ask for a cover letter, I still write one and I upload it as an additional document. And in those situations where I'm channeling a letter to somebody I know, through somebody I know in an organization, I will find out who the right person to address the cover letter is, and I will make sure that their name is spelled correctly, and I will address that cover letter to that individual rather than to whom it may concern, or dear sir or madam, or dear hiring manager. If you have to, you can do that, but it's always nicer to address it to a person. So in this cover letter here that Charlie Brown, CEM, is applying for a position in Liberty County Emergency Management, there's several things I want to point out. So the first is that the first paragraph has to mention rather the job ID, and that's your introduction. So in that first paragraph, ask what you want them to do. Basically, my way of saying that is I want to be considered for this position, and I tell them where I saw it, because maybe it was a job referral, and in which case I might say emergency management specialist, that was a position sent to me by Jane Doe at your organization. But if I got it off the IAEM job board, it shows that I'm connected to IAEM. If I found it in a classified ad or on their website, it at least shows sort of what level of research I've been doing. The next thing is, again, mention the source. Next thing is I want to discuss my background and qualifications in the next paragraph. So I want to tell them a very brief synopsis of one or two paragraphs at the most about what I bring to the table, so that if they don't want to, they don't have to read my resume. In that paragraph, I mention the KSAs, so that can literally be, again, a substitute for the resume. And in this case, this person received the Intern of the Year award for 2 years. And so examples of excellence. The next thing you want to do after you introduce your qualifications is you want to ask, hey, giving you my resume here, I would love to have an opportunity to talk with you about why I am a good fit for this position. And I talk about the importance of teamwork. I always like to talk about as a member of your management team, or as a member of your team, or what have you. So that team emphasis, I think, is really important, because people like to hire good team members. They don't like prima donnas. And so the ask is that I would like to meet with you. Then I do a closing where I sort of sum it all up and say that I can be reached this number or this email. And then I always close with thank you for your consideration. And I want to point out that both these highlighted areas have the word consider in some form, right? I'm asking them initially to be considered for the position, but with the closing, I'm using the word consideration because that has a double meaning. It has the meaning of your consideration of me as a candidate, but it also has the meaning your consideration in looking at my resume. You're being considerate of me. So either way it gets read, it's fine. And I like that phrase for that reason. So this is the basic cover letter, and I'll show you a couple of cover letters that I submitted, and they're long. And they were long for a reason, because I've got more than 35 years in the work world, and the kinds of positions that I was looking for, looking at, I wanted to suck them in and give them very specific things that they could chew on in the cover letter. So I mentioned my clearance, I mentioned my certifications right up front, work experience, education, and again, if you look at the closing paragraphs, I talk about I would welcome the opportunity to speak with you about how I can assist your client in managing the NOAA Cybersecurity Center. The closing line, how I would appreciate speaking with you about how I can contribute to Dawson's success by leading the State Department WMD contract. Again, use the closing to sort of tie everything up and put it out there in a nice little neat package. Don't hint, don't beat around the bush. Don't leave it unsaid. Be very specific. I want to meet with you. That's really what you want out of this. You want an interview, because if you just wind up in their files for future consideration, that's not what you want out of this. And then I'll leave you with Colin Powell's quote. It's all about preparation, hard work, and learning from failure, right? You're not going to get every job you apply for. If you do, please hit me up with your secret to your success. But it comes right down to, you got to get your fingernails dirty. You've got to spend the time to write the cover letters, to write the resumes, to make them specific for each and every job you're applying for. There's no easy way around it. Can't beat around the bush. So my LinkedIn profile is up here. My email's up here. I invite you to link in with me. I will tell you that the last 2 jobs that I got were directly as a result of being on LinkedIn. Recruiters actively look at LinkedIn for potential candidates, and a headhunter found me for Cadmus, and I found this job that I have at Samsung through a contact, a colleague that I was linked in on, and I saw that he was looking for somebody he mentioned in the post, and I responded to him directly on LinkedIn. So very, very powerful. Go ahead and link up with me. I have about 3,600 contacts, and if you join my LinkedIn network, then you get second-degree contacts and third-degree contacts through me, and so it broadens your search as well. So that's what I got for you. Happy to take any questions.
All right, Eric. Well, we got a couple of questions that came in earlier, and I was holding them until the end because I wanted you to get through the rest of the presentation. One is dates for degrees, list them or not list them. And the other one is your security clearance. Do you put that under the job title, or just kind of in a section where it lists kind of your certifications or whatever?
Okay, last one first. I would put my security clearance in my profile, and you'll see that I did just that in my profile. In fact, I'll back up a little bit. Whoops. There it is. There's my profile. I have my certifications and my clearance. And that's the very last thing in the profile that people read. That reminds me of something, and that is, people tend to read the first and the last of stuff. And so the important stuff should either be first or last, but in the middle is stuff that people gloss over. So absolutely put your clearances, absolutely your certifications. Look, I have 2 master's degrees, one of which is an MBA, but if I had known when I was doing my MBA that people wouldn't care about an MBA or a Master of Public Policy as much as they cared that I was a certified emergency manager, I might not have spent the money, but that's another story. The other question, remind me again, Pam.
Sorry, I couldn't get it unmuted. Dates on degrees. Do you
Dates on
list them?
degrees.
Do you not list them? Does it depend on the type of application?
It depends, in my mind, on your age. So I'm 59, and for this latest round of applications that I was doing, I ended up starting to take my dates off. In fact, you will see in this resume that I do not have the dates. Why? Because it counts me if I have a BA in 1985 and I have a master's degree in 95 and 97. It couches me as an older person. And so age discrimination is a real thing in hiring. Nobody's going to tell you that they're not hiring you because you're older, but recruiters will be the first to tell you that it's a real thing out there. So if it's at all problematic, leave it off. Nobody cares as much when you got the degree as that you got the degree. And if they want to, after they hire you, they can validate the dates independently. If you are fresh out of college or fresh out of grad school and you want to put, you have the dates, that's fine. Nobody's going to count off for having dates or not having dates.
Okay, and going along with the degree question, if someone has multiple degrees, for example, this person has an associate's degree in a unique technical field, would it be reasonable to list that when applying for jobs with companies in that field?
Absolutely.
Okay, and then, so this one says, I work with a federal agency. There are many different types of trainings. How would one apply that to a resume as far as experience or skills?
Well, you really have to cull through and figure out all those trainings. Are they useful? So let me give you an example. If you have been through the COR training, right, the contracting officers representative training, and you're applying to a professional services firm or really any kind of firm that's contracting with the federal government in any way, shape, or form, then that's valuable training if you're trying to develop new business with the federal government, right? So yes, I would list that. But if that's just one of 20 trainings that you took because they sent you to training again, you don't need to list it. List what's relevant to the position, right? So now I will tell you this, I also have a totally separate document. It's a curriculum vitae. It lists every conference that I've ever talked at, every article I've ever written, and every class that I've taken. I use that very sparingly, and I introduce that to sort of back up my claims that I know what I'm doing. But, I'm not impressed if I'm reading a resume for a job in the emergency services and somebody says, they have CPR, or they have a CPR instructor. I'm like, okay, I'm more impressed if they have a, paramedic. But again, how relevant is that training to the job? And if you're applying for jobs in the emergency management field and you tell me you have IS 100, 200, 300, 400, 700, and 800, I'm like, big deal. Because you should have those. It's like telling me that you know how to use Microsoft Word. So think about what this training is and how it applies and how to use, I don't have a better word, how sexy it is for the job that you're applying for.
And as an added note to, you mentioning 100, 200, 700, 800, As far as listing those FEMA certifications, there's a couple of different options. You can either list multiple FEMA certifications available on request and have an organized binder maybe with everything in there, or like he said, like a list, you can make it like a table of context maybe. Depending on the job you're applying for, maybe if you want to highlight professional development series, that's still almost kind of, minimum these days. But if you've gone through the basic academy, if you've gone through the advanced academy, those are a little stronger qualifications. Those almost kind of fall under the same thing as maybe some of the degrees. So those might be worth listing, that you completed the FEMA Basic Academy or the FEMA Advanced Academy and things like that. Again, take into consideration what you're applying for, the level of expertise. If you're applying for a junior or an entry level position and you've completed the Basic Academy, that's great. If you're applying for a project manager or some type of management level, stating that you completed the Basic Academy may not be what you want to put at the top of your resume. So just kind of try to understand, where that all falls in.
Yeah, and since you mentioned that, I'll tell you that FEMA is moving away from PDS and APS, the Professional Development Series and the Advanced Professional Series, in favor of the EMPP programs. So, if you've got Advanced Professional Series and that's it, keep it on there. But, in 5 or 10 years, nobody's going to be talking about that anymore. They're only going to be talking about basic, advanced, and executive.
So there's one question about your personal experience. Your certifications are fascinating, specifically the CISSP and the PMP. How much time do you spend generally speaking to prepare, and what point in your career did you pursue your certificates? So did you wait till later? Did you do them early on? When did you decide it was a good time to start pursuing some of these specialty certificates?
So I always, I got into emergency management and I decided that I wanted to become a CEM, and I was working diligently toward that. And then little by little, I kept finding out about other certifications. I bumped into a guy that I was working with. He had a CPP, and my brother got his PMP. And so I would start hearing about these other certifications, and then decided sort of one at a time to, I piecemealed them. I got to the point, actually, though, when I got a CM and a CPP, that I was thinking broadly about what we do in protection, and I decided that emergency management, security, business continuity, and information security were almost inextricably linked. And I made a commitment to myself to go after those. I only just got the CISSP earlier this year. I will tell you that of the four of them that I have, that was the most brutal in terms of technical knowledge required. I studied for 6 months and did 2,000 practice questions, and I read 2,000 pages worth of documentation and books to study for that. I think that CISSP is a great certification to have, because cyber is playing such an increasingly important role in our lives. But for me, the most personally significant certification that I have is the CEM. And for those of you who are, this is the Emergency Management Growth Initiative. So I would be remiss if I didn't advocate for you to get your AEM if you don't have the requisite number of years. And if you do, to put your binder together, and now it's all online, so it's a whole lot easier. But get your documentation together and get your CEM, because as a profession, the thing that distinguishes us individually the most is the CEM. One of the things about this profession, and I'm actually going to do an Envision talk on this, or I'm going to put in an Envision talk next year about this. But I feel very strongly that there are multiple pathways to entry into emergency management. Some people choose emergency management. Other people get, get chosen for them. Other people, it's sort of collateral duty is assigned, and then they decide that that's where they want to stay. But there's no sort of one unifying standard way to get into the profession. And not everybody, I mean, we have people that are political appointees that have no experience in emergency management. And so to differentiate yourself, to stand out the most, get the CEM. Because when you get the CEM, it says you've got the body of knowledge, you've got the work experience, you've demonstrated this to your peers, and your peers agree that you have what it takes to call yourself a certified emergency manager. It's not something like some of these other certifications where you can just stroke a check and get it. CEM stands out, and I would say that for any of the certifications I have. But there are certifications out there that are relatively meaningless. You pay your check, you get your certification, your initials after your name. We all know what those certifications are, and people that are hiring know what those certifications are, and you're not going to pull wool over anybody's eyes.
Yep, that's very good information there, especially with the CEM and the AEM. If, like he was saying, if you have the experience to apply for the CEM, go for it. Find a mentor. There is a timeline from the time you submit your application or take your test. And Eric, correct me if I'm wrong. I think it's from the time you submit your application till the time you take your test. I think it's 1 year to complete the process. So start getting your binder and all your paperwork together before you actually put in your application for it. That way you're not rushing around over the next year, because there's some things in there that's pretty lengthy. I mean, one of them might be, getting a letter from one of your state representatives or something like that. And that's not something that comes in the mail overnight. So definitely, you can go to the IAEM website. You can put in where you live. They'll give you contact information for a mentor in your area who will help walk you through that process. If you don't have the minimum 3 years of working experience, then go ahead and apply for your AEM. It's just submitting a couple things and taking the test. It's a whole lot easier. And that shows you that you're at the entry level stage of your career. One of the good things about the AEM and the CEM certification is that's worldwide in our industry. That's a set standard that we have within our organization. Said the person meets this minimum qualification, and we all know, not just nationally but worldwide, what that minimum qualification is. So that's definitely an important thing. I'm actually working on my CEM myself, so we're definitely something important to put through. I don't see any more questions, and I know we're over on time, so I'm going to go ahead and thank Eric for all his time with this. I will go ahead and say, please, please, please connect on LinkedIn. Connect to Emergency Management Growth Initiative. Connect to Eric or me. Lorraine had to run. She had something else to handle, but you can connect with her. I actually got started with EMGI by connecting with Lorraine. We had a couple of questions, and then now, lo and behold, I have my own initiative within her organization. I have had so many contacts. I'm actually looking to upgrade my career, and my contacts that I've made through LinkedIn have opened a handful of doors for me as well, that hopefully will lead to something here soon. So it is definitely worthwhile. If you're not active on LinkedIn, if your profile is not updated, go ahead and get that updated. Some of you may have seen in some of the comments I mentioned before, prior to my life here in emergency management, I had a construction background. None of that's on my LinkedIn profile. I don't put any of that on my applications unless it is something that might be pertinent to it. If I'm applying for a job and I need to show prior project management or budget experience, I might kind of throw a little paragraph in about that. But I'm not going to totally kill my resume, because moving forward, I'm in the emergency management field. My construction experience was kind of a prior life. But if you do have any further questions, feel free to reach out to us. We can go ahead and get you in contact. Lorraine and I, one thing we are discussing is down the road, getting a network of emergency managers within the field, or just anybody in the emergency management profession to sign on and volunteer to review resumes. It won't be done immediately. It's going to take us a little while to build up our network, but definitely keep an eye on EMGI. Look for future trainings. We have interview skills coming up in a few weeks. I think it's the beginning of August, and then the beginning of September, we have one with leadership skills. So definitely important things when you're trying to land a job in EM, or really any field for that matter. So keep an eye on us, and as we get out updates, you can see them on our website. Anything else, Erik?
Good luck to you guys. And don't forget to connect.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.
Have a great night.